Hi, I'm Shelley Young, owner of the Chopping Block, and today I'm going to teach you how to cook a steak. We're going to make one of my favorite recipes as an example, which is steak au poivre, or steak with pepper. And I'm going to make that with New York strips today, but we could also use a beef tenderloin for this, or a ribeye, or a T-bone, or a porterhouse. All of those cuts of steak are tender and don't require long, slow cooking. Talk to your butcher about that. They'll help you pick the right steak for, grilling, sautéing, that type of cooking, which is what we're going to focus on today. So I want to say a couple things about steaks before I get into the recipe. One of the things that you can do at home that gives you a great advantage over the restaurant's steak that they serve is that you can take your meat, your steak, and you can let that sit out at room temperature for about 20 to 30 minutes, and I would highly recommend that. Now in a restaurant we can't really do that. You can imagine it would be hard to keep track of all the different steaks and sanitation, all that. We want to be very cognizant of that. But at home we can do that, and what that allows your steak to do is cook more evenly. And that's really, I think, the advantage of a home cook over a restaurant cook is how you can do that, how you can achieve that. One is you let the meat get a little bit warmer, and we're going to use not an incredibly high heat in the pan. We do that for two reasons. One, so that the steak is one temperature from the outside to the inside. In the ideal world, we don't see brown and then pink. We see one color through the whole steak, and we can achieve that through those two methods. A little bit of room temperature, closer to room temperature, and not such a hot pan. So let's go to our recipe now. Steak au poivre. First thing I'm going to do is season this with salt, and in all cases we're going to use a good amount of salt. One little trick for me: the fattier the meat, the more salt I use. Beef tenderloin, not a very fatty cut, I use a little less salt. Both sides we're going to season this with salt, and since this is steak au poivre, we're going to use cracked black peppercorn. We have a video to show you how to do this, but au poivre literally means completely coated in black pepper. Make sure it's cracked, not ground finely. That's the trick. If you grind it finely, it will be too hot. But put it on to your liking. Press that in a little bit so the peppercorns don't fall off. I'm going to flip this over and do the other side. So I'm using this is an all-clad skillet. It's got a stainless steel interior, aluminum pan. This is a great pan for this recipe. Cast iron is also a great pan for cooking steaks, but not a steak with a cream sauce, because your sauce will discolor from the cast iron. This pan has been heating for quite some time. It's not smoking hot, but it's very hot. Medium to medium-high heat. I like to just remove it from the heat a little bit and add my oil, and see how that's smoking, but the pan was not smoking. I want that pan to be good and hot when the steaks go in, and then I'm going to reduce the heat to closer to medium, from medium-low. And then I'm going to cook it slowly, but leave it alone primarily. What I want to have happen is that the surface of the steak, blood will start to rise to the surface. If I flip it over and blood rises to the surface again, that's medium rare. So I can see the blood just starting to rise to the surface here, so I'm going to flip these steaks over. So I can just see a little bit of blood rising here. One thing I didn't mention before, and I really want to make a point to say, is that this is just two steaks, and this is a 12-inch skillet. You want to make sure that you've got a lot of open space around the meat. Otherwise, if it's overcrowded, it won't brown properly and it will stick. So make sure to be careful with that. I'm going to take the steak over and out of the pan, and we're going to make the sauce next. And I'm going to let this steak rest. So I like to start with A couple tablespoons of butter. I think I also neglected to mention I used a little grapeseed oil in the pan when I sauteed the steaks. And I do that so it doesn't burn like the butter will. So I have a couple tablespoons of butter, 1 shallot minced, and I like to give the shallot a little saute. My handy flat whisk, I use this for pan sauces, works great. Just scrape the fond, the little bits on the bottom of the pan into the sauce. The next thing I'm going to do is to glaze the pan with some brandy. I always remove it from the fire, then add the brandy and put it back. And stand back just in case it does catch on fire. If your pan is much hotter than this one, it can certainly do that. So, and I'm going to let that reduce down. Next, I'm going to add a little Dijon mustard. And heavy cream. You cannot make this with half and half or milk or anything like that. You need to use heavy cream. That is what thickens this pan sauce. Just a little bit of chicken stock. We'll let this simmer and thicken, and our steaks will be rested and ready to eat. So we've finished our pan sauce. It's got a nice consistency there. Just coats the back of a spoon. With this kind of a steak, I like to put the sauce underneath. You've got that crunchy pepper coating, and so I like the sauce underneath versus all over the top of the steak. Our steak has rested, and that's one of the tricks to a good steak as well, or fish or chicken, really whatever you're cooking. You want to let that rest a little bit. That allows the meat to relax, but the juices go back up into the steak. I want them to stay in the steak and not on the plate. And that is how you cook a steak.